In the marble lobby of Crosstech Biomedical, 6-year-old Emma Cross stood frozen among the morning rush. Glass elevators climbed the walls like transparent insects. Polished stone reflected 100 hurrying bodies in business suits and lab coats. The child's mouth hung open, tears streaming down her cheeks, but no sound emerged. Not a whimper, not a gasp, just silence, stark and terrible against the echo of footsteps and the electronic chime of elevator doors. The crowd parted around her the way water flows past stone in a river. No one stopped. No one looked long enough to see the trembling in her small frame. The way her fingers clutched a stuffed rabbit so tightly the fabric bunched white around her knuckles. They had places to be, meetings to attend, innovations to pursue. A crying child was someone else's problem. A silent crying child was easier to ignore. Marcus Reed pushed his cleaning cart across the lobby floor, the wheels squeaking softly against marble. The gray janitor's uniform hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight over the years, the kind of weight that comes off slowly when a man forgets to care about food. His mop dripped a thin trail of water behind him. He'd been invisible for so long that he'd learned to move through crowds like a ghost, present but unseen, there but not acknowledged. Then he saw her. The little girl stood 20 feet away, trapped in whatever nightmare played behind those woody, terrified eyes. Marcus stopped. His hands moved before his mind fully processed the decision. Slow, deliberate, palms open where she could see them. The signs flowed from his fingers with the muscle memory of a language he'd once taught to hundreds. You are safe. I see you. Emma's eyes locked onto his hands. The motion caught her attention the way a flame draws a moth. Her chest still heaved with silent sobs, but her gaze tracked his fingers as they formed shapes in the air between them. He signed again. Breathe with me. Count to 5. Her small hands lifted, shaking so badly the movements were barely legible. But they were there. Signs, communication, a bridge across the chasm of her terror. Scared, her fingers formed. Too loud. Marcus knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. His hands never stopped moving, a steady rhythm of reassurance. I know, but you're not alone. Watch my hands. One breath, then another. The voice tore through the lobby like a knife through silk. Heels clicked rapid fire across marble, growing louder with each step. Don't touch my child! Victoria Cross appeared like a storm given human form. Her black suit was tailored to precision, her dark hair pulled back so severely it seemed to pull her features tight with perpetual control. She covered the distance to her daughter in seconds, positioning her body between Marcus and Emma with the fierce instinct of a mother bear. Security guards materialized from their posts, hands on radios, moving to surround the scene. But Marcus didn't stop signing. His hands continued their gentle motion even as Victoria blocked his view. You are brave. You are okay. Just breathe. Then impossibly, Emma's hands appeared around her mother's side. Small fingers forming shapes Victoria hadn't seen in 2 years. He helped, Emma signed to her mother. I'm okay, Mommy. The lobby fell silent. 100 people who'd been too busy to stop for a crying child now stood transfixed, watching a 6-year-old communicate for the first time since the world learned about the Crosstech tragedy. The girl who hadn't spoken since her father died in that laboratory explosion. The daughter of the youngest biotech CEO in America, speaking without words to a janitor in a gray uniform. Victoria's hands shook as she pulled Emma close. Her eyes met Marcus's over her daughter's head. Confusion warred with something else in her expression. Suspicion. Wonder. The desperate hope of someone drowning who suddenly feels solid ground beneath their feet. How do you know sign language? The question came out sharp, defensive. I used to teach it. Marcus straightened slowly, giving the security guards no reason to escalate. His voice was quiet, carefully neutral. The voice of someone who'd learned long ago not to give anyone a reason to notice him. Emma reached toward Marcus, her small hand extending past Victoria's protective embrace. Victoria caught her daughter's wrist gently but firmly, pulling her back. But Emma kept her eyes on Marcus as her mother ushered her toward the executive elevators. The little girl watched him over Victoria's shoulder, her expression something Marcus hadn't seen on anyone's face in 6 years. Gratitude. Recognition. As if she'd seen him as a person, not just the invisible hand that cleaned the floors she walked across. The crowd dispersed. The moment dissolved into the building's routine hum. Security guards returned to their stations, though Marcus noticed the way they watched him now, hands still near their radios. He picked up his mop. The water had formed a small puddle on the marble. He cleaned it methodically, each stroke of the mop erasing evidence that he'd ever stopped, ever knelt, ever reached across the invisible boundary that separated people like him from people like them. Sometimes the people screaming the loudest are the ones standing in perfect silence. The thought surfaced in Marcus's mind as he pushed his cart toward the service elevator. You just have to know how to listen. 40 floors above the lobby, Victoria Cross stood before floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Seattle like a photograph. Her office occupied the corner of the building, positioned to capture both mountain and water views. Awards lined the walls. Forbes 30 Under 30, Innovator of the Year, Woman in Tech Leadership. Each plaque and trophy represented a milestone, a battle won, a door broken down. They should have felt like victories. Instead, they felt like headstones marking the grave of the woman she used to be. The photograph on her desk showed a different Victoria, younger by only 2 years but aged by lifetimes of grief. James stood beside her in his white lab coat, his arm around her waist, the other hand resting on baby Emma's head. All three of them were laughing. She couldn't remember anymore what had been so funny that day. She'd forgotten the sound of her own genuine laughter. Her assistant appeared in the doorway with an espresso and a leather portfolio. 8 meetings scheduled for today. 12 investor calls, 4 product development reviews. The rhythm of business continued its relentless march, and Victoria had learned to march in step. Work was easier than feeling. Control was safer than vulnerability. She'd inherited her father's medical device company when it was circling bankruptcy, a dinosaur unable to adapt to new markets. In 5 years, she transformed it into Crosstech Biomedical, a leader in AI-assisted communication technology. The old assembly lines that built pacemakers now produced neural interfaces. The aging workforce had been replaced with engineers half their age and twice their salary. Her father's name was still on the building, but the company bore no resemblance to his vision. He'd wanted to help hearts keep beating. She'd chosen to help voices be heard. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her daughter hadn't spoken in 2 years. The memory surfaced without permission, vivid and vicious. Dubai. 3 in the morning, the hotel room phone screaming into the darkness. The executive director's voice carefully controlled the way people speak when they're delivering catastrophic news. There's been an incident at the Seattle facility. James had stayed late to address a pressure valve issue in Lab 7. A minor concern, nothing urgent, the kind of problem a dedicated CTO handled personally rather than delegating to night shift maintenance. The explosion was instantaneous, a catastrophic failure in the containment system. No warning, no time for evacuation protocols. The lab's fire suppression system activated immediately, but by then there was nothing left to save. James Cross, 34 years old, died doing the job he loved, in the building his wife owned. Emma had been in the parking lot. That detail came later, pieced together from security footage and witness statements. Victoria had been halfway across the world, closing a deal that would have made James proud. Emma had been with her father. He'd brought her to work because the nanny called in sick and Victoria's phone was unreachable in back-to-back meetings. Emma had fallen asleep in his office. She'd woken up and wandered downstairs looking for him. She'd been standing by the window waiting for Daddy to finish work when Lab 7 lit up the night sky. The doctors called it trauma-induced selective mutism, post-traumatic stress manifesting as an inability to speak. Emma understood language perfectly. She could hear, process, comprehend, but something in her mind had closed the pathway between thought and sound. The explosion had stolen her father and locked her voice away in the same terrible moment. Victoria had hired the best specialists money could buy, speech therapists from Boston, trauma counselors from San Francisco, a psychiatrist who'd pioneered work with children who'd witnessed violence, private school with trained staff, round-the-clock monitoring. Every expert said the same thing: she needs time. Be patient, push too hard and you'll make it worse. 2 years of patience, 2 years of watching her daughter live in silence, 2 years of feeling helpless while running a billion-dollar company, powerful in every way except the one that mattered. She couldn't save Emma. She couldn't bring James back. She couldn't even reach across the growing chasm that separated mother and daughter until this morning, when a janitor with kind eyes and careful hands spoke to Emma in a language Victoria didn't understand, and her daughter responded. The security report landed on Victoria's desk at noon. Incident report, unauthorized contact with executive family member. Marcus Reed's employee file was attached, a thin collection of routine background check results. No criminal record. 3 years of consistent employment at Crosstech. Previous work history included janitorial positions at 2 other corporate facilities. Standard references, nothing remarkable. Nothing that explained how he knew specialized sign language. Nothing that explained why he could reach her daughter when nobody else could. Victoria opened her laptop. The search began as simple curiosity. Within an hour, it had become an obsession. She watched the security footage 14 times, studying the way Marcus's hands moved. The signs weren't standard ASL. She'd learned basic signs after Emma stopped speaking, enough to communicate simple needs. But what Marcus used was different, more specialized, more precise, medical, almost. She searched, sign language trauma children communication. The results flooded her screen. Academic journals, research papers, clinical studies. One name kept appearing in the citations. SignBridge, a neural translation system designed specifically for children with trauma-induced communication disorders. The technology used AI to interpret non-standard signing patterns and convert them to synthesized speech. Revolutionary work, published 7 years ago by Dr. Marcus Reed. Victoria's hand froze on the mouse. She clicked the author profile. The photograph showed a younger man, clean-shaven, wearing a button-down shirt and university credentials. His smile was genuine, unguarded. The smile of someone who hadn't yet learned that the world could take everything. The biography was brief. DeRay Reed is founder and CEO of SignBridge Technologies, a Seattle-based startup developing AI-powered communication tools for nonverbal children. His work combines speech therapy, linguistics, and machine learning to create systems that amplify voices that might otherwise never be heard. The article was dated 7 years ago. The photograph was archived. The man in the gray janitor's uniform bore little resemblance to the confident innovator in the university portrait, but the eyes were the same. Victoria searched deeper. News articles from 6 years ago painted a different picture. Tech innovator Marcus Reed accused of contract fraud. SignBridge founder loses company in legal battle. Reed claims technology stolen. Courts disagree. The headlines tracked a familiar arc of public disgrace. Promising startup. Partnership with major corporation. Sudden legal dispute. Company seized. Reputation destroyed. The details were murky, buried in legal language and carefully worded press releases. Marcus Reed had partnered with Titan Global, a corporate giant with deep pockets and deeper reach. The partnership agreement gave Titan manufacturing and distribution rights. Then Marcus's wife died in a car accident. 3 weeks later, Titan claimed full ownership of SignBridge Technology. Marcus contested. Titan's lawyers produced contracts signed by both founders. The courts ruled in Titan's favor. Public opinion turned against Marcus. Failed tech founder tries to renege on agreement after personal tragedy. The narrative wrote itself. One article mentioned Sarah Reed's death more thoroughly, a car accident on Interstate 5. Drunk driver crossed the median at 70 miles per hour. Sarah died on impact. Dylan Reed, 3 years old, survived with minor injuries. Marcus Reed took his son and disappeared from public view. The comment sections beneath those old articles were vicious. Internet strangers dispensing judgment without mercy. Scammer. Thief. Using his dead wife's memory to steal his own company. People who'd never built anything, never lost anything, deciding that a grieving widower must be a fraud. Victoria closed the articles. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened Crosstech's acquisition files. 3 years ago, they'd purchased VoiceLink Pro from Titan Global. The technology powered Crosstech's flagship medical devices, neural interfaces that help speech-impaired patients communicate. The system was elegant, sophisticated, far ahead of anything else on the market. It had been instrumental in Crosstech's pivot from legacy medical devices to cutting-edge neural tech. She pulled the technical specifications. The core algorithm, the neural network architecture. Then she pulled Signbridge's original patent filing from the university database. The algorithms were identical, not similar, not inspired by, identical. The same neural pathways, the same decision trees, the same revolutionary approach to interpreting non-standard communication patterns. Just renamed, repackaged, sold under Titan's brand. Victoria sat back in her chair. The Seattle skyline blurred beyond her windows. Her company had unknowingly built itself on stolen technology. The man who'd invented it mopped the floors of the building that profited from his genius. She found the transfer contract buried in Titan's acquisition documents. The signature line showed Marcus Reed's name. The date was 3 days after Sarah Reed's death. 3 days after losing his wife, Marcus had supposedly signed away his life's work. Victoria had worked enough corporate deals to recognize forgery. She pulled Marcus's signature from his original partnership agreement with Titan. Different slant, different pressure. The loop on the R formed differently. She wasn't a forensic expert, but she didn't need to be. This signature was fake. Her phone buzzed. Emma's school calling. Everything okay? Just confirming pickup time. Victoria's assistant handling the call. The machinery of her carefully controlled life continuing its rotation while her world tilted on its axis. The man who mopped her floors had invented the technology that saved her company. The technology had been stolen through forgery while he was incapacitated by grief. And Victoria's company had purchased it, used it, profited from it for 3 years, never knowing the truth. She thought about Emma standing in that lobby, tears streaming in silence. She thought about Marcus kneeling in his gray uniform, hands moving with gentle precision. She thought about James dead in a lab explosion while she was 8,000 miles away. She thought about all the ways people could be stolen from you. Death, distance, silence, invisible theft executed through legal documents and corporate maneuvering. Darkness had fallen over Seattle by the time Victoria finally left her office. She sat alone in her car in the executive parking garage, engine off, hands on the steering wheel. Emma was home with the security detail and the night nanny, safe, cared for, alone in all the ways that mattered. Victoria pulled Marcus Reed's employee file up on her phone. His address was listed, worker housing complex on the city's east side, the kind of apartment building where people lived when they'd run out of better options. She started her car. The decision felt inevitable, like watching herself from outside her body, observing with detached curiosity as she made choices that would change everything. The rain started before she reached the interstate. By the time she pulled up to Marcus's building, it was pouring. She sat in her car, wipers beating rhythmically, staring at the illuminated windows of ordinary lives. Her phone showed 8 missed calls from the office, 6 urgent emails, a board member demanding a status update on the lobby incident, the machinery of crisis management churning without her. She dialed her house. Emma's night nanny answered. "Is she awake?" "Just finishing homework, Ms. Cross." "Put her on." Victoria switched to the video call. Emma's face appeared on screen, solemn and watchful. Victoria signed as she spoke. "Do you want to see the man from the lobby, the one who helped you?" Emma's expression transformed. The careful mask she wore constantly cracked just enough to let something through. Hope, excitement, the ghost of the child she'd been before silence claimed her. "Yes," Emma signed back. "He understands." 20 minutes later, Victoria pulled back into Marcus Reed's parking lot with Emma in the back seat. The rain hadn't let up. Emma clutched her stuffed rabbit and watched the building with an intensity that made Victoria's chest ache. When had her daughter become so guarded? When had anticipation become something rare enough to notice? Marcus answered the door wearing worn jeans and a flannel shirt. Confusion crossed his face, followed by concern. His eyes moved from Victoria to Emma, assessing the situation with the quick calculation of someone accustomed to unexpected trouble. "Ms. Cross, is everything all right? Can we come in?" Victoria heard the edge in her own voice. Not quite a request, not quite a demand. The tone of someone who'd spent too many years having doors open for her, losing the ability to ask rather than expect. "I need to talk to you." Marcus stepped back. His apartment was small but clean. Books lined makeshift shelves built from cinder blocks and pine planks. Linguistics textbooks, child development journals, programming manuals. The entertainment center held a modest television and a laptop that had to be at least 10 years old. Drawings covered the refrigerator, held in place with alphabet magnets. A child's artwork showing dinosaurs and spaceships in stick figure families. "Dad, who is it?" A boy appeared from the bedroom, 8 or 9 years old, wearing a shirt with a T-Rex on the front. He stopped when he saw strangers in his living room. Dylan, Marcus's son, the one who'd survived the accident that killed his mother. He looked at Emma with shy curiosity, then his hands lifted, forming signs with practiced fluidity. "Hi, I'm Dylan." Emma's face transformed. She signed back, movements careful but eager. "I'm Emma. I like your shirt." The two children stood there, communicating in gestures while the adults watched. Marcus's expression softened in a way that made him look younger, less guarded. Victoria felt something twist in her chest. When was the last time Emma had initiated social interaction? When was the last time she'd seen her daughter smile like that? Thunder rolled across the sky. Victoria's phone buzzed with a traffic alert. Interstate 5 flooding. Bridge closure warnings. The storm system had settled over Seattle with no signs of moving on. "The bridge is flooded." Marcus was checking his own phone. "Highway 99 too. Happens every time we get rain like this. Usually takes a few hours to clear." Victoria felt trapped and grateful in equal measure. She should want to leave. She should reschedule this conversation for somewhere neutral, somewhere professional. But Emma had already moved toward Dylan's drawing table, and both children were pulling out crayons, signing rapid conversations about colors and favorite animals. "We can wait," Victoria heard herself say. Marcus made dinner from what he had: potatoes, carrots, onions, chicken stock. He moved around the small kitchen with quiet efficiency, comfortable in the domestic rhythm. Toast from day-old bread, tea brewing in mugs that didn't match. Simple food, but the apartment filled with warmth and the yeasty smell of toasting bread. Emma laughed, not with sound, of course, but her shoulders shook and her face lit up at something Dylan signed about dinosaurs and basketball. Victoria stood in Marcus's tiny living room, watching her daughter experience joy, and felt tears burning behind her eyes. They ate at the small table. Dylan told stories through signs about his school day, translating for Victoria when her limited knowledge faltered. Emma responded slowly at first, then with growing confidence. The two children built a language bridge between them with the easy grace of kids who hadn't yet learned that connection required effort. After dinner, the children curled up on the couch with a blanket and an illustrated book about space. Emma's eyes grew heavy. Dylan signed gentle commentary about the pictures until both children drifted toward sleep. Marcus and Victoria sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The rain drummed against windows. The apartment's radiator hissed softly. In the warm dimness, the barriers between CEO and janitor felt more porous. They were just two people who'd lost their partners. Two parents trying to save their children. Two survivors navigating the aftermath of theft, both the kind that took lives and the kind that took everything else. "I know who you are." Victoria's voice was quiet but firm. "I read about Sign Bridge." Marcus went still, his hands wrapped around his tea mug, but he didn't drink. He didn't look away. "Then you know more than most people do." His voice carried no anger, just resignation, the tone of someone who'd stopped fighting a long time ago. "I know what Titan did to you. Do you?" There was something sharp beneath the words now, not directed at her exactly, but present nonetheless. "Do you know what it feels like to lose everything while people call you a liar? To have strangers decide your grief is fake because a corporation's lawyers are more believable than you are?" "No." Victoria met his eyes. "But I know what it feels like to watch your husband die while you're too far away to help. I know what it feels like to see your child disappear inside themselves and not be able to reach them. I know what it feels like to build everything you have on sand and pray the foundation doesn't collapse." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Some of the sharpness faded. He drank his tea, set the mug down carefully. "Why are you here, Ms. Cross?" "My company uses your technology, VoiceLink Pro. We bought it from Titan 3 years ago. It powers every neural interface device we make. It's the reason Crosstech survived the pivot from medical devices to communication tech." "I know." Marcus's voice was soft. I clean the labs where they test it. I see the devices. I read the specifications when I'm emptying the trash cans. Every night I mop floors in a building using the technology I created, sold under someone else's name. Did you know the signature on the transfer contract was forged? Marcus's head snapped up. His eyes widened. For the first time, Victoria saw genuine surprise break through his careful control. What? She pulled out the printed documents from her bag, spread them on the table. The transfer contract, the signature analysis, the comparison with his earlier signatures. She watched him study the papers, watched his hands start to shake. This isn't your handwriting. Someone forged this 3 days after Sarah died. While you were grieving, while you were barely functional, someone signed away your company in your name. Marcus stood abruptly, paced to the window, pressed his hands against the glass like he needed to feel something solid. His shoulders rose and fell with deep breaths. I always thought I must have signed it and blocked it out. I was so broken after Sarah. Those first weeks were a blur. I couldn't remember what I'd eaten, where I'd been. I thought maybe I'd been so desperate to escape, to just make it all stop, that I'd signed without understanding what I was doing. You didn't sign it. Titan stole Signbridge, and I can prove it. Marcus turned. His face was raw with something between rage and relief. The expression of someone who'd carried guilt for 6 years, suddenly discovering it wasn't his to carry. Why are you telling me this? Because it's the truth, and because my company profited from what they did to you. I didn't know, but now I do. I can't unknow it. What do you want from me? Victoria had been asking herself that same question since she got in her car. What did she want? Justice? Redemption? Absolution for building her empire on stolen ground? I don't know yet, but I can't walk away. Not from this, not from you. Marcus moved back to the table, sat down heavily. He looked at his son sleeping on the couch, at Emma curled beside him. 2 children who'd lost a parent, finding comfort in shared silence and crude language. They'll destroy you if you go after Titan. You know that, right? They have unlimited resources. They have politicians in their pocket. They've spent 6 years making me the villain. If you challenge them, they'll do the same to you. Let them try, Victoria's voice hardened. I've built a company from nothing. I've buried my husband. I've watched my daughter disappear into silence. Titan doesn't scare me. It should. Maybe, but Emma hasn't been this happy in 2 years. She hasn't communicated like this since James died. You did that in 30 seconds in a lobby. You reached her when an army of specialists couldn't. That's worth fighting for. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, not as a CEO or as the woman who employed him, but as a person, as someone who understood loss, as someone who'd also learned that sometimes the only choice left was to stop running and start fighting. If we do this, he said slowly, if we really go after Titan, there's no going back. They won't just fight legally. They'll destroy reputations. They'll manufacture scandals. They'll make everyone believe we're the criminals. And we might lose. We might, Victoria agreed. But what's the alternative? You stay invisible forever? Emma stays silent? We let them win because fighting is hard? I have Dylan to think about. I can't put him through another media circus. He was 3 when Sarah died, but he remembers the photographers, the shouting, the kids at school saying his dad was a thief. I can't do that to him again. Emma stirred on the couch. Her hand moved in sleep, forming signs even in dreams. Marcus and Victoria both watched her. Dylan shifted, his arm moving to rest across Emma's shoulders in an unconscious gesture of comfort. My daughter just told me with her hands that she wants to speak but can't, Victoria said quietly. She wants to tell the world what really happened in that lobby, but she has no voice. You gave the voiceless a way to speak, and they stole it from you. Maybe it's time we steal it back. The rain pounded harder. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the small apartment. Thunder followed, shaking the windows in their frames. Marcus stared at the forged signature on the table between them. I'll think about it, he finally said. Victoria nodded. It was enough. For now, it was enough. She gathered Emma an hour later, after the highway patrol declared the roads passable. Emma signed sleepy protest about leaving Dylan. Victoria promised they'd see him again soon. She didn't know if it was true, but she saw hope flicker in her daughter's eyes, and she would have promised anything to keep that light alive. Marcus stood in his doorway watching them go. Victoria turned back once from her car. He was still there, backlit by the warm glow of his modest apartment. A man who'd lost everything and built a small, careful life from the pieces. A man who'd invented magic and had it stolen. A man who'd been invisible so long, he'd almost forgotten he was real. That night, Victoria stood in Emma's doorway, watching her daughter sleep. Emma's hands rested on the pillow, fingers slightly curved, as if even in sleep she was forming words no one could hear. The stuffed rabbit lay tucked under her arm. Her face was peaceful in a way Victoria hadn't seen since before the explosion. She thought about Marcus in his small apartment, about Dylan's drawings on the refrigerator, about the way both children had communicated across the silence. She thought about James, about the last time she'd seen him alive, about all the things left unsaid because she'd assumed there would be more time. She thought about the forged signature, about the technology built on theft, about the invisible man who cleaned floors in the building built on his genius. Her phone buzzed, a news alert. She almost ignored it, but something made her look. The headline punched through her exhaustion. Janitor approaches CEO's child, cross-tech employee under investigation. Below it, a 7-second video clip, security footage. Marcus reaching toward Emma in the lobby, the moment frozen in pixels. Except the video was edited, cut off before Emma signed back. Cropped to remove context, it showed Marcus approaching a crying child, Victoria pushing him away, security closing in. The caption called him dangerous. The comments were already vicious. Victoria's hands went cold. She clicked through to the source. Anonymous upload, posted 2 hours ago. Already going viral. 10,000 shares, 20,000. Climbing exponentially. Someone had waited, watched, and at the perfect moment, when Victoria was beginning to see a path forward, they'd release this. Not the truth. A carefully crafted lie. Titan Global's fingerprints were all over it. The war had begun. The viral video hit 20 million views by dawn. Victoria watched the numbers climb from her home office. Emma asleep upstairs, security doubled outside. Each refresh brought more comments, more outrage, more demands that Crosstech fire the dangerous janitor who'd approached a child. The algorithm had found its perfect villain, a middle-aged man in a gray uniform reaching toward a crying girl. Context didn't matter. Truth didn't sell. Fear did. Her phone rang at 6 a.m. Board members, lawyers, the head of public relations with damage control scenarios outlined in bullet points. Victoria listened to each call with the kind of cold focus that had built her company. They wanted Marcus fired immediately. They wanted a public statement condemning his actions. They wanted Victoria to throw him to the wolves and save Crosstech's reputation. She hung up on the third board member who used the word liability. Emma appeared in the doorway as morning light broke across Seattle. Her hair was tangled from sleep, the stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. She moved to Victoria's desk and turned the laptop screen toward herself. The video was still playing on mute. Emma watched it twice, her face expressionless. Then her hands moved. This is a lie. Victoria pulled Emma into her lap. The girl was getting bigger, heavier, but she still fit in the space between Victoria's arms and chest, still smelled like children's shampoo and safety. I know, sweetheart. They cut it. They didn't show me signing back. They didn't show him helping. I know. Emma's hands clenched into fists on her lap. When they opened again, the signs came fast and angry. I want to tell them the truth. Why can't I just tell them? The question broke something in Victoria's chest because you can't speak, because trauma stole your voice and gave you silence instead, because the world doesn't stop for healing, doesn't wait for the voiceless to find their words again. But Victoria didn't sign any of that. Instead, her hands formed a promise. You will tell them. I'm going to make sure you can. 2 hours later, Victoria stood in her private garage, staring at the prototype schematics she'd printed from Signbridge's patent files. The original design was 7 years old, built on technology that had evolved exponentially since Marcus first coded the neural translation algorithms. She'd spent the night studying machine learning architecture, relearning programming languages she hadn't touched since graduate school. Her hands remembered the keyboard's rhythm even if her mind had grown rusty from years in boardrooms instead of development labs. She called Marcus from an encrypted line. His voice was careful when he answered, the wariness of someone expecting the other shoe to drop. Ms. Cross, I need your help. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Emma wants to testify. She wants to tell the world what really happened, but she needs a voice. We need to build Signbridge 2.0. The silence stretched long enough that Victoria wondered if the connection had dropped. Then Marcus spoke, his voice rough with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. If I'm seen near you or Emma right now, they'll use it against you. The optics? I don't care about optics. I care about giving my daughter a voice and exposing the truth about Titan. Are you in or not? Another pause. She heard him breathing, heard the sound of movement, a door closing. Dylan's at school until 3. I can be there in an hour. Marcus arrived after dark, a precaution they both understood without discussing. He parked 3 blocks away and approached through the service entrance Victoria rarely used. Dylan was with him, the boy carrying a backpack full of homework and looking around Victoria's house with wide eyes that tried not to show amazement. Emma met them at the door, already signing greetings before they'd fully entered. The children disappeared into Emma's room within minutes. Victoria led Marcus to the converted office space where she'd set up a makeshift development lab. 2 high-end computers, 3 monitors, neural interface equipment borrowed from Crosstech's research division. The original Signbridge schematics spread across her desk. Marcus stopped in the doorway. His eyes moved across the setup, cataloging each piece of equipment, each line of code visible on the screens. When he looked at Victoria, his expression held something she couldn't quite name. Grief, maybe, or the ghost of who he'd been before the world took everything. This is 7 years out of date. He moved to the main computer, fingers already reaching for the keyboard. The neural networks have advanced 3 generations since I designed this. The processing requirements alone. Can you update it? His hands hovered over the keys, not quite touching. Yes, but it'll take time. If we work every night for 2 weeks, maybe 3, we could have a functioning prototype, maybe. Then we start tonight. They fell into rhythm like musicians who'd played together before, each anticipating the other's movements. Marcus coded while Victoria handled hardware integration. He explained the neural pathways in language stripped of unnecessary jargon, and she absorbed it with the quick comprehension of someone who'd built a career on understanding complex systems fast. They worked past midnight, fueled by coffee that grew cold in forgotten mugs, and the shared understanding that they were building something that mattered. Dylan fell asleep on Victoria's couch around 10, his math homework incomplete beside him. Emma lasted until 11, fighting to keep her eyes open, wanting to be part of whatever magic the adults were creating. Victoria carried her daughter to bed while Marcus covered Dylan with a blanket and dimmed the lights. When Victoria returned to the makeshift lab, Marcus was staring at the screen with the intensity of someone seeing ghosts in the code. His fingers moved across the keyboard, updating algorithms he'd written when his wife was alive, when his son was a toddler, when his future held promise instead of janitorial shifts and invisibility. This section here, he pointed to a block of code. Sarah wrote this part. She was better with the linguistic pattern recognition than I was. She understood how children's minds work, how they build language structures before they can articulate them. Victoria pulled up a chair beside him. Tell me about her. Marcus's hands stilled on the keyboard. For a moment, Victoria thought he'd refuse. Then he spoke, his voice soft enough that it felt like a confession. She taught at a school for deaf children. That's how we met. I was doing my clinical practicum in speech therapy, and she was the only teacher who didn't look at those kids like they were broken. She saw them as whole people who just communicated differently. His fingers traced the lines of code his dead wife had written. She believed every child deserved to be heard, in whatever language they spoke. Sign, speech, silence. It didn't matter. The message was what counted. She would have loved Emma. Yeah, she would have. Marcus returned to coding, but his movements were gentler now, reverent almost. Signbridge was supposed to be her legacy. Help kids like the ones she taught every day. Give them a bridge between their world and the hearing world. Instead, it became the thing that killed her. Victoria's hands stilled on the hardware she'd been configuring. The accident wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? If I hadn't partnered with Titan, if I'd kept Signbridge small and independent, Sarah wouldn't have been driving to their corporate office that day. She wouldn't have been on that highway at that hour. Some drunk asshole wouldn't have crossed the median and his voice cracked. He stopped talking abruptly, jaw clenched tight. Victoria understood the weight of that guilt. She'd carried its twins since the night James died. If I hadn't been in Dubai, if I'd been home, if I'd told him not to work late, if I'd prioritized my family over one more deal, the if-onlys could bury you alive if you let them. My husband died because I built a company that needed him to work late fixing problems I was too far away to notice. The words came out harder than she intended. I was closing a deal that would make us millions while he was bleeding out in a laboratory explosion. I got on that plane to Dubai, knowing Emma would miss me, knowing James would handle everything alone, and I went anyway because the business needed me. Except the business didn't need me. My family did, and I chose wrong. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, the way he had in his apartment during the rainstorm, seeing past the CEO armor to the woman drowning in guilt underneath. We can't fix the past, he said quietly, but maybe we can fix what they broke, build something that helps other people's kids, even if we can't save our own partners. Victoria nodded. They returned to work. The code compiled, the hardware integrated. Piece by piece, Signbridge 2.0 began to take shape. 3 nights later, the prototype was ready for initial testing. Marcus had reconfigured the neural networks to process Emma's specific signing patterns, accounting for the way trauma affected her gesture formation. The system was more sophisticated than the original Signbridge, faster and more intuitive. It ran on a tablet interface instead of requiring dedicated hardware. If it worked, it could be scaled, mass-produced, given to thousands of children who needed voices. Emma sat in front of the camera, nervous energy making her hands shake. Dylan stood beside her, signing encouragement. Marcus knelt by the tablet, making final adjustments. Victoria watched from behind the camera, her heart hammering with hope and terror in equal measure. "We're going to teach the computer your language," Marcus signed to Emma. "Ready?" Emma nodded, her hands lifted. Marcus guided her through basic signs. Hello, goodbye, happy, sad, scared, safe. Each time Emma signed, the AI processed her movements, learning the unique patterns of her communication. The first attempts were clunky, robotic. The synthesized voice that emerged from the tablet sounded like a text-to-speech program from 20 years ago. But after 50 signs, something shifted. The AI began to smooth the rough edges. After 100 signs, the voice sounded almost natural. After 200, it was beginning to capture inflection, emotion, the subtle variations that made language human. Emma signed, "I love you, Mommy." The tablet's voice spoke the words aloud, and Victoria's world tilted. Her daughter's voice. Not the voice Emma had lost, not the sound Victoria remembered from before the explosion, but a voice nonetheless. A bridge across the silence. Emma stared at the tablet, eyes wide. Then she signed again. Faster now. "I have a voice." The synthesized speech followed immediately. "I have a voice." Emma's silent laugh shook her shoulders. She turned to Dylan and signed something complicated about dinosaurs in space and being able to talk forever. Dylan laughed and signed back, and the tablet translated both sides of the conversation in a flowing exchange that sounded almost like two children chatting naturally. Marcus stood slowly, watching his creation work the way he'd always dreamed it would. His eyes were wet. Victoria crossed the room and pulled Emma into a hug. Her daughter's hands kept moving, even pressed against Victoria's chest, signing joy and excitement into the space between them. The tablet kept translating, kept giving voice to Emma's happiness, and Victoria let herself cry for the first time since James's funeral. Dylan tackled Marcus in a hug. "Dad, you did it. You made magic." Marcus held his son, his face buried in Dylan's hair. His voice was muffled but audible. "We all did." Later, after the children had finally exhausted themselves and fallen asleep tangled together on Victoria's couch, Marcus and Victoria sat in her kitchen drinking whiskey that cost more than his monthly rent. The prototype sat on the counter between them, a testament to what they'd built together. "This changes everything," Victoria said. With this, Emma can testify at a press conference. She can tell the world what really happened. We can expose the edited video for the lie it is. Marcus swirled the whiskey in his glass. And then Titan will come at us with everything they have. They won't let this technology exist without a fight. It's theirs now, legally if not morally. If we release Signbridge 2.0, we're opening a war on two fronts: the public court over the lobby incident and the legal court over patent infringement. Let them come. Victoria's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I've got lawyers, I've got evidence of the forged signature, and now I've got Emma's voice to prove Marcus Reed isn't a predator, he's a miracle worker. Her phone buzzed, another news alert. She almost ignored it, but Marcus's expression made her look. The headline drained blood from her face. James Cross under investigation for corporate espionage before death. The article was time-stamped 30 minutes ago. Major outlets had already picked it up. Documents leaked to the press showed James Cross allegedly stealing Crosstech trade secrets in the months before his death. Email correspondence, file transfer logs, meeting notes suggesting he planned to sell proprietary technology to competitors. Every document was a forgery. Victoria knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat. James had been many things: brilliant, obsessive, occasionally arrogant, but never disloyal, never a thief. He'd built Crosstech beside here, believed in the mission as deeply as she did. But the documents looked real. Sophisticated forgeries designed to pass initial scrutiny. By the time forensic analysis proved them fake, the damage would be done. James's reputation would be destroyed. Crosstech's integrity would be questioned. Victoria would be painted as either complicit or catastrophically incompetent. Titan was burning down everything she'd built to protect their theft of Signbridge. Marcus read the article over her shoulder. This is what they do. They did it to me with the contract fraud accusations. They're doing it to James now that he can't defend himself. By tomorrow, there will be more documents, more anonymous sources, more carefully crafted lies that sound plausible enough to stick. Victoria's hands clenched around her phone hard enough to make the case creak. They're using my dead husband as a weapon against me. Yes. Because I threatened to expose them. Yes. Because you and I decided to fight back instead of staying quiet. Marcus met her eyes. We can still stop. I can disappear again. You can issue a statement condemning me, cut all ties, protect Crosstech. Titan will back off if they think you are not a threat anymore. Victoria thought about Emma asleep on the couch, finally able to speak after 2 years of silence. She thought about Dylan, who'd spent 6 years believing his father was a fraud. She thought about James's memory being desecrated with lies. She thought about Marcus's choice 6 years ago to surrender rather than fight, to accept invisibility rather than risk his son's well-being. The easy path was right there. Take it and everything stopped. The attacks, the investigations, the viral videos. Life could return to its controlled, manageable misery. No, the word came out harder than stone. We go forward. We expose them. We make them pay for every life they've ruined. Marcus studied her face. You'll lose everything. Maybe, but I'll lose it fighting. That counts for something. The board called an emergency meeting for the following morning. Victoria arrived to find 9 members already seated, their faces grim. The leaked documents about James were displayed on the conference room screen, blown up large enough that every forged signature was visible. Richard Sutton, the oldest board member and her father's former partner, spoke first. His voice carried the weight of institutional authority and barely concealed condescension. Victoria, we need to discuss damage control. These allegations against James are lies. Victoria remained standing, refusing the chair they'd left empty for her at the table. Every document is forged. James never stole anything from this company. He died protecting it. The forensic analysis will take weeks. Sutton's tone suggested he was explaining basic concepts to a slow child. In the meantime, our stock is in freefall. Investors are demanding answers. We need to issue a statement distancing Crosstech from these allegations. But distancing how? By calling my dead husband a thief to save our stock price? By acknowledging the investigation and promising full cooperation with authorities. Another board member, Patricia Chen, pushed a prepared statement across the table. This language preserves plausible deniability while showing we take the accusations seriously. Victoria skimmed the statement. It was a masterclass in corporate equivocation, carefully worded to avoid direct accusation while implying guilt. James Cross's actions are under review. Crosstech maintains the highest ethical standards and will cooperate fully with any investigation. The company cannot comment on ongoing legal matters, but takes these allegations with utmost seriousness. Translation: James might have been a criminal, but Crosstech is clean. Blame the dead man. She tore the paper in half. We're not throwing James under the bus to appease Titan Global. The room went silent. Sutton's face flushed red. Titan? What does Titan have to do with everything? Victoria pulled out her own documents. The forged sign bridge transfer contract, the signature analysis, the patent comparison showing VoiceLink Pro was identical to stolen technology. Titan Global committed fraud 6 years ago to steal technology from Marcus Reed. Crosstech unknowingly purchased that stolen technology. Now Titan is manufacturing evidence against James because I threatened to expose them. She laid it all out. The timeline, the proof, the connection between the lobby video going viral and the James allegations dropping the same week. Titan's pattern of destroying anyone who challenged them. Sutton's face went from red to purple. Are you seriously suggesting we go to war with a Fortune 500 company over a janitor's conspiracy theory? I'm suggesting we stand up for the truth. James was murdered. The room erupted. Multiple board members talking over each other, Chen demanding evidence, Sutton threatening to call for a vote of no confidence, others trying to restore order. Victoria waited for the chaos to settle. When she spoke again, her voice cut through the noise like a blade. James discovered the truth about VoiceLink Pro 3 months before he died. He contacted Marcus Reed's former colleagues. He built a legal case proving Titan had committed fraud. He was planning to whistleblow the day after the explosion. She pulled up James's unsent email on her phone, projected it onto the conference room screen. This is a draft he wrote the day he died. He never sent it because someone disabled the lab's safety system remotely and killed him first. The email read like a message from beyond the grave. James explaining what he'd found, naming Titan's fraud, warning Victoria that if she was reading this draft instead of receiving it properly, something had happened to him, telling her to finish what he started, telling her he loved her and Emma, always. The room fell silent. Several board members stared at the screen, faces pale. Sutton looked like he'd been punched. Do you have proof the explosion wasn't an accident? Chen's voice was careful now, legal instinct overriding corporate reflex. I have safety override logs showing the system was disabled 10 minutes before the explosion. I have James's research into Titan's fraud. I have a pattern of Titan destroying everyone who threatens their stolen technology. I don't have a smoking gun, but I have enough to demand an FBI investigation. And if you're wrong, Sutton had recovered his authoritative tone. If this is grief and paranoia instead of evidence, you'll destroy Crosstech pursuing a vendetta against our largest technology partner. Victoria met his eyes. I'm not wrong, and we're going public with everything in 3 days at a press conference. Emma will testify using the sign bridge prototype Marcus and I built. She'll prove the lobby video was edited. Marcus will present evidence of Titan's original fraud. I'll demand a full investigation into James's death. The board can support me or vote me out. Your choice. She walked out before they could respond. Behind her, the conference room exploded into argument. She didn't care. The path was clear now. Forward into the fire or backward into surrender. She'd made her choice. Emma's private school called 2 hours later. There was a situation. Photographers outside, reporters asking questions. Could Victoria come immediately? Victoria was 15 minutes away when the Wapiti news feed hit her phone. Emma stood on the school's front steps, surrounded by cameras and shouting reporters. The little girl's face was pale, her hands pressed over her ears against the noise. Teachers tried to create a barrier, but the press pushed closer, microphones extended, questions overlapping into meaningless roar. Traffic was gridlocked. Construction on Fifth Avenue had narrowed 3 lanes to 1. Victoria watched helplessly from her car as the feed showed her daughter frozen in terror, trapped by the very people who'd called Marcus dangerous for approaching her in a quiet lobby. Then Marcus appeared on screen. He pushed through the crowd, moving with purpose and zero concern for the cameras turning his direction. Security guards tried to intercept him, but he brushed past them like they were cobwebs. He reached Emma and dropped to one knee, blocking her from the cameras with his body. His hands moved in signs Victoria could see even on the small phone screen. Breathe with me. You're safe. Emma's eyes locked onto his, her hands lowered from her ears. She signed back. I'm scared. I know, but I'm here. Just breathe. The crowd pressed closer. Someone grabbed Marcus's shoulder. A security guard pulled him backward. Marcus didn't resist, but his eyes never left Emma. His hands kept signing even as they dragged him away. You're brave. You're safe. The image captured everything. A child reaching for the man being restrained. A mother's car visible at the edge of the frame, blocked in traffic, too far away to help. The raw injustice of it crystallized in a single moment. Victoria abandoned her car in the middle of the street and ran. Her heels slowed her down and she kicked them off, sprinting the last 3 blocks in stockings that shredded on the pavement. By the time she reached the school, Marcus was on the ground with security holding him down. Emma stood above him, signing frantically to teachers who didn't understand. Victoria shoved through the cameras. Reporters shouted questions she ignored. She reached Marcus and extended her hand. He looked up, surprised. She pulled him to his feet in full view of every camera, every lens, every reporter hungry for the next viral moment. This man saved my daughter twice. Her voice carried across the crowd, amplified by the dozen microphones pointed her direction. His name is Marcus Reed, and he's not a predator. He's a hero. The cameras exploded with flashes. Victoria kept Marcus's hand in hers, kept her eyes locked on his, and let the world see exactly where she stood. That night, the image went viral for different reasons than the lobby video. CEO defends disgraced janitor. Victoria Cross stands by controversial employee. Crosstech in crisis leader backs accused man. The narrative was shifting, fragmenting, losing the clean simplicity of villain and victim. Marcus sat in Victoria's kitchen while Dylan and Emma played upstairs, their laughter drifting down through the floorboards. His wrist bore bruises from where security had restrained him. Victoria had insisted on ice and anti-inflammatory medication, and now they sat in the strange intimacy of shared combat, survivors of the same battle. You shouldn't have done that. His voice held no accusation, just weariness. Now they'll come after you harder. They were already coming after me. At least this way I'm not hiding. Marcus pressed the ice pack against his wrist. Dylan asked me tonight if we were going to have to move again. He's 8 years old and he already knows what it means when people look at you like you're dangerous. Emma stopped speaking because she saw her father die. Both our kids have been through more than children should survive. Maybe it's time we stop running from the people who hurt them and start fighting back. Fighting back gets people killed. The words came out flat, haunted. James fought back. Look what happened to him. Victoria's hands tightened around her coffee mug. You think Titan killed James? I think James asked questions about technology they'd stolen. I think he threatened to expose them. I think 2 weeks later he was dead in an explosion caused by safety systems that mysteriously failed. Marcus looked at her. I think if we push hard enough, they'll do the same to us. Then we push harder than they can handle. We go public before they can prepare. We get the evidence in front of enough people that killing us would only prove we're right. That's not how corporate warfare works. They won't kill you. They'll destroy your reputation, drain your resources, make your life so unbearable that you'll beg them to stop. They'll go after Dylan, after Emma, after everyone you love until you have nothing left to protect. Victoria stood and moved to the window. Outside, Seattle's lights spread across the darkness like stars fallen to earth. Her city, her company's headquarters visible in the skyline, a monument to everything she'd built, everything she stood to lose. James left me a message. Her reflection in the glass looked older than 32. In that email draft, he said if I was reading it instead of receiving it properly, I'd know what happened to him. He told me to finish what he started, make them pay. Those were his exact words. She turned to face Marcus. I can't let him down again. I wasn't there when he needed me most. I can be there now, even if it's too late for him. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down the ice pack and stood. If we're doing this, we need to be smart. Titan's already playing dirty with the James allegations. They'll keep manufacturing evidence until something sticks. We need to move faster than they can respond. The press conference is in 3 days. Emma's ready to testify with the prototype. Are you? I've been ready for 6 years. I just needed someone to stand beside me. They looked at each other across Victoria's expensive kitchen, two people who'd lost everything and found each other in the ruins. The air between them felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Victoria took a step closer. Marcus didn't move away. Thank you. Her voice was softer now. For saving Emma today. For building this with me. For not running when running would have been easier. Thank you for seeing me. Marcus's response was equally quiet. For 6 years I've been invisible. You looked at me and saw a person worth fighting for. That's not something I can repay. You already did. You gave Emma her voice back. The moment stretched. Victoria was aware of everything. The distance between them, the way Marcus's eyes held hers, the slight lean of his body toward her like gravity pulling planets into orbit. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't felt this kind of pull since before James died. Hadn't let herself feel anything except grief and guilt in the crushing weight of responsibility. She stepped back. The spell broke. Marcus exhaled slowly and Victoria wondered if he'd been holding his breath too. I should get Dylan home. His voice was rough. School tomorrow. Victoria nodded, called the children down, watched Marcus and Dylan drive away into the night, their taillights disappearing around the corner. Emma stood beside her in the doorway, signing a question Victoria almost didn't want to answer. Do you like Mr. Marcus? The truth was complicated. Yes, no, maybe. I don't know if I'm allowed to like anyone who isn't James. I don't know if moving forward means betraying backward. I don't know if this feeling is real or just trauma bonding with the first person who understands loss the way I do. Victoria signed back. He's a good man helping us. That's all. Emma gave her a look that suggested 6-year-olds saw through adult lies better than adults admitted. But she didn't press, just signed goodnight and headed upstairs with her rabbit. Victoria stayed in the doorway long after they'd left, staring at the empty street, feeling the ghost of a moment that almost happened haunting the space where Marcus had stood. The next day brought fresh attacks, more anonymous sources feeding stories to hungry media outlets. Marcus Reed's former colleagues claiming he had been unstable after Sarah's death, prone to paranoid accusations and emotional outbursts. Former Crosstech employees suggesting James Cross had acted erratically in his final months, secretive about his work, possibly covering illegal activities. Each story carefully sourced to avoid libel charges while implying guilt through innuendo and selective fact. Victoria's lawyers worked around the clock preparing for the press conference. They'd secured the Seattle Convention Center's main ballroom, invited every major outlet, prepared evidence packets for distribution. Emma had practiced her testimony 100 times with the Signbridge prototype until the synthesized voice sounded natural and confident. The night before the press conference, Victoria couldn't sleep. She stood in her home office reviewing James's old files for the 1,000th time. His research into VoiceLink Pro, his notes on the Signbridge patents, his correspondence with former Titan employees who'd grown consciences and wanted to talk. One email caught her attention. She'd missed it before, buried in James's drafts folder. Addressed to Marcus Reed. Never sent. Dated 2 weeks before the explosion. Mr. Reed, I know what they did to you. I have proof. Signbridge was stolen and my company has been profiting from that theft. I can't undo the past, but I can help you fight for the future. I've compiled evidence of the forged transfer contract and Titan's fraud. I'd like to meet and discuss how we can expose this together. My wife Victoria doesn't know about this yet. I wanted to verify everything before involving her. If you're willing to fight again, I'm willing to stand beside you. You deserve justice. Sarah deserves justice. Let's make sure they get it. James Cross. Victoria read it 3 times. James had known. He'd found Marcus, found the truth, built a case. He'd been planning to approach Marcus directly, to stand up against Titan, to risk everything for someone he'd never met whose technology had been stolen. Her husband had been a hero, and Titan had killed him for it. She forwarded the email to her lawyer with instructions to include it in tomorrow's press conference materials. Then she called Marcus. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the late hour. Victoria, what's wrong? James knew about you. Before he died, he'd found evidence of the fraud. He was planning to contact you, to help you fight Titan. They killed him to stop it. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Victoria thought the connection had dropped. Then Marcus spoke, his voice thick with emotion. He died trying to help me? He died trying to do what's right, just like we're doing now. Victoria, if they killed James for this, they won't hesitate. I know. But we're not stopping. We're going to that press conference tomorrow. We're going to tell the truth, and we're going to make sure James's death meant something. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, we finished this. For James, for Sarah, for every person they've destroyed. For Emma and Dylan, so they grow up in a world where speaking truth doesn't get you killed. They said goodnight. Victoria returned to James's files, reading through his research with fresh eyes. Her husband had been brilliant and careful and brave. He'd known the risk. He'd chosen to fight anyway. Now it was her turn to carry that fight forward. Tomorrow the world would hear Emma's voice. Tomorrow Marcus would reclaim his stolen creation. Tomorrow Titan would learn that some things couldn't be buried under lies and forged documents and corporate power. Tomorrow the war truly began. But tonight Victoria allowed herself to feel something besides grief when she thought about James. Pride, gratitude, the kind of love that survives death and transforms into purpose. She fell asleep at her desk. James's research spread before her, the sound of Emma's synthesized voice still echoing in her memory. I have a voice. I have a voice. I have a voice. The truth would not stay silent anymore. Week 8 arrived with legal documents delivered by courier. Nathan signed for the envelope at Victoria's front door, recognizing the law firm letterhead before opening it. The petition for emergency guardianship named Catherine Hayes as proposed guardian, citing Victoria's isolation, questionable judgment in hiring caregivers, and alleged mental incompetence. Attached was a temporary restraining order. Nathan Cruz was to cease all contact with Victoria Hayes immediately, pending investigation into his suitability as a care provider. The paper shook in his hands. Catherine had moved faster than expected, weaponizing the Oakland report into legal grounds for control. Failure to comply could result in criminal charges for violating a court order. Victoria read the documents in silence, her face cycling through shock to fury to something that looked like defeat. She can actually do this. Take away my right to choose my own life. The hearing is in 3 weeks. Nathan scanned the legal language, looking for loopholes. If you can prove competence, show that you're making sound decisions. How? By demonstrating I hired someone with an abuse allegation? That's Catherine's entire argument. Victoria's hands clenched on the papers. She's going to win. Not if we fight. Nathan pulled out his phone. You need Marcus Hartley, your family lawyer. He'll say the same thing Catherine's saying, that I'm vulnerable and making poor choices. Then we prove you're not vulnerable. We document your progress, get Dr. Chen's testimony, show the court you're improving specifically because of the care choices you made. Victoria looked at him with exhaustion that went bone deep. And what about you? The order says you can't have contact with me. If you stay, you're violating a court order. The implications settled like lead in Nathan's stomach. If he left, Victoria faced the guardianship battle alone while Catherine presented her case unopposed. If he stayed, he risked arrest, losing Sophie permanently if child services decided he was unfit. The choice between protecting Victoria and protecting his daughter wasn't a choice at all. I have to go. The words tasted like failure, but Victoria nodded. I know. Sophie needs a father who's not in jail. This isn't forever. Nathan stood, already feeling the distance opening between them. Just until the hearing. We'll fight this properly, through lawyers and evidence. Victoria wheeled herself to the window, staring out at gardens she'd barely seen from ground level. Go, before Catherine finds another reason to make this worse. Nathan left the mansion knowing he might never return. The agency would assign Victoria a new caregiver, someone Catherine would probably approve, someone who wouldn't challenge her or push Victoria beyond comfort. 3 weeks until the hearing meant 3 weeks of Victoria backsliding into isolation, while Catherine built her case for permanent control. At his apartment, Sophie was coloring at the kitchen table under Tom Rodriguez's watchful eye. She looked up with a smile that died when she saw Nathan's expression. "We have to stay away from Miss Hayes for a while." "Why?" Sophie's crayon froze mid-stroke. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, baby. Grown-up legal stuff. Her sister thinks I'm not good for her, but you helped her stand." Sophie's indignation was fierce. "You made her happy. Sometimes people don't see what's really happening." Nathan pulled his daughter close. "But we're going to fix it, okay?" The next 3 weeks passed in slow agony. Nathan found work at a hardware store, minimum wage and mindless, stocking shelves and avoiding thoughts of Victoria alone in that cold mansion. Tom brought news occasionally. Dr. Chen still came for therapy sessions, but reported Victoria's motivation had evaporated. The temporary caregiver lasted 4 days before quitting. Victoria refused a replacement. Sophie drew pictures of dragons and knights that she couldn't deliver, stacking them on her dresser like prayers. Nathan called Marcus Hartley and learned what he'd expected. The guardianship case was strong without evidence of Victoria's competence and progress. Dr. Chen's testimony would help, but Catherine had her own medical experts who'd argue Victoria needed institutional care. Nathan's testimony would be dismissed as biased, potentially harmful given the restraining order. "You're the reason she's in this position." Hartley's voice carried regret rather than accusation. "If you'd never been hired, Catherine wouldn't have grounds for the mental incompetence claim. So I destroyed her life by trying to help it. You both made choices that seemed right at the time. Now we deal with consequences." 2 weeks before the hearing, Nathan received a call from an unknown number. Victoria's voice came through shaky but determined. "I'm not supposed to be talking to you, but I needed you to know I'm working. Every day. The standing practice, the frame walking, everything. If I can show the court I'm improving, maybe they'll see Catherine's wrong. You're doing this alone? Dr. Chen helps when she comes, but mostly yes. I have to prove I can be independent. Be careful." Nathan's chest tightened. "You could hurt yourself without proper support. I've hurt myself plenty with proper support. At least this time I'm choosing it." Victoria paused, and Nathan heard something in the silence that sounded like longing. "Sophie okay? She misses you. Draws you pictures every day." "I miss her too. Both of you. This house is too quiet without her stories and your terrible jokes. They're not terrible. They're dad jokes. There's a difference." The laugh Victoria gave him was worth risking the phone call. "Nathan, when this is over, regardless of how it goes, thank you for seeing me as more than my limitations. You never had limitations. Just circumstances you're learning to navigate." After hanging up, Nathan stared at his phone for a long time. 3 weeks ago, Victoria couldn't stand without support. Now she was attempting frame walking alone in that mansion, driven by desperation to prove herself worthy of autonomy. The image of her falling without anyone to help made his hands shake. Tom found him on the apartment steps that evening, staring at nothing. "You look like a man who's lost something important." "I think I might have." Nathan's voice came out hollow. "I came to help her, and instead I made everything worse. You gave her reason to fight." Tom settled onto the step beside him. "Before you showed up, she'd given up. Now she's working herself into the ground trying to prove she deserves freedom. That's not worse. That's what hope looks like when it's desperate. What if she loses? What if Catherine wins and locks her away somewhere? Then you figure out the next fight." "But Nathan," Tom's weathered hand gripped his shoulder, "maybe the fight isn't just about Victoria keeping her freedom. Maybe it's about you both figuring out what you're willing to risk for each other." The words settled into Nathan's bones and stayed there, growing heavier as the hearing date approached. The night before court, Sophie climbed into his bed around midnight, unable to sleep. "What if they say Miss Hayes has to go away? Then we find ways to visit her." Nathan pulled his daughter close. "But I think she's stronger than people realize. She might surprise everyone. She's the strongest person I know. Except you, Daddy." "Why except me?" "Because you're the strongest person in the whole world." Nathan held his 7-year-old and hoped she'd never learn how fragile strength actually was, how easily it could shatter under the weight of impossible choices. The courthouse was modern glass and steel, nothing like the warm, wood-paneled buildings from TV shows. Nathan arrived early with Sophie and Tom, finding seats in the gallery while lawyers gathered at their tables. Catherine sat perfectly composed in designer armor, her attorney a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she'd never lost an argument. Marcus Hartley shuffled papers at the defense table, competent but outmatched. Victoria entered last, wheeled in by Dr. Chen, wearing a simple dress that somehow made her look both vulnerable and fierce. She didn't look at Nathan, keeping her gaze straight ahead as Chen positioned her wheelchair at the defense table. The distance between them felt measured in miles rather than courtroom feet. Judge Thompson entered, a woman in her 60s with the expression of someone who'd heard every manipulation and lie the legal system could produce. She surveyed the courtroom before speaking. This is a guardianship hearing for Victoria Hayes. Ms. Catherine Hayes seeks emergency guardianship citing mental incompetence and vulnerability. Let's proceed. Catherine's attorney opened with surgical precision. May it please the court, the evidence will show that Victoria Hayes, while physically disabled, has demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment that endangers her well-being. She has isolated herself, refused professional medical care, and formed inappropriate attachments to unqualified caregivers. The attorney presented the Oakland report, police photographs, and all, making Nathan's dismissed case sound like proof of predatory behavior. She called a neuropsychologist who testified about isolation's effects on judgment, noting that Victoria's withdrawal from social contact suggested possible depression and impaired decision-making capacity. Catherine took the stand wearing an expression of pained concern. I love my sister. Since our parents died, I've tried to protect her, especially after the accident. But Victoria refuses help. She's gone through 24 caregivers in 8 months because she can't maintain healthy professional relationships. Her attorney guided Catherine through a narrative of rejection and poor choices, culminating in Nathan's hiring. You discovered Mr. Cross had a history of abuse allegations? Yes. My private investigator found police reports from Oakland. When I showed Victoria, she refused to dismiss him. That's when I knew her judgment was too impaired for her to protect herself. The words painted Victoria as helpless prey and Nathan as predator, twisting 3 weeks of hard-won progress into evidence of manipulation. Nathan's hands clenched until Tom placed a steadying grip on his shoulder. Hartley's cross-examination barely dented Catherine's composure. When asked if Victoria had made measurable physical progress, Catherine admitted improvement, but attributed it to Dr. Chen's expertise rather than Nathan's involvement. When questioned about alternative care options, Catherine presented brochures for expensive facilities with full medical staff. Your sister could receive this level of care at home with proper support. She's tried that. Catherine's voice carried practiced patience. 24 failed attempts. At some point, we have to accept she needs more structured intervention. The morning session ended badly. Nathan could read it in Hartley's expression, in the way Dr. Hare. Chen's jaw tightened, in Victoria's rigid posture as they wheeled her to a private room during recess. He wanted to go to her to offer some reassurance, but the restraining order kept him anchored to his seat while Catherine's attorney built walls around Victoria's freedom. The afternoon brought the defense's case. Hartley called Dr. Chen first, who testified about Victoria's remarkable progress over 8 weeks. Her core strength has improved 40%. Standing duration went from 0 to sustained periods exceeding 1 minute. These gains directly correlate with Mr. Cross's tenure as her caregiver. Catherine's attorney attacked on cross-examination, but she still requires a wheelchair for daily mobility, correct? For longer distances, yes, and she still cannot perform basic self-care tasks without assistance? She's learning adaptive techniques that, yes or no, doctor, can Victoria Hayes live independently right now? Chen's reluctance was visible. Not entirely independently, no. The admission landed like a stone. Hartley tried to recover by calling witnesses to Victoria's cognitive abilities. Her financial advisor testifying she'd managed complex investments competently throughout her disability. Her former climbing partner speaking to her intelligence and determination. But Catherine's attorney made each witness acknowledge Victoria's isolation, her limited social contact, her dependency on paid caregivers. When Hartley announced Nathan as the next witness, Catherine's attorney objected. Your Honor, Mr. Cross is subject to a restraining order for Victoria's protection. His testimony is not only biased, but potentially harmful. Judge Thompson considered this. Mr. Hartley, your client sought this order. You can't now claim his testimony is essential. Nathan's chance to defend Victoria evaporated with the judge's ruling. Hartley moved on to character witnesses. Tom Rodriguez describing Nathan's dedication as a father and professional, the agency coordinator testifying about his positive record prior to Oakland. But without Nathan's own voice, the narrative remained Catherine's to control. The final witness caught everyone off guard. Sophie Cross, called by Marcus Hartley against Nathan's whispered protest. The 7-year-old walked to the stand with her shoulders back, clutching one of her dragon drawings. Sophie, do you know Miss Hayes? Yes, she's my family. How did you meet her? Daddy brought me to her house when I was sick. She was scared of kids, but I drew her a dragon and she liked it. We became friends. Hartley guided Sophie through descriptions of Victoria's improvements. The cooking together, the standing practice Sophie had witnessed. Can you tell the court what you saw Miss Hayes do? She stood up. Sophie's voice carried pure excitement. At those bar things, Daddy helped, but she did it herself. She was crying because she was so happy. Catherine's attorney declined to cross-examine a child, which was probably wise given Sophie's fierce loyalty. But the testimony felt thin against hours of expert witnesses and Catherine's systematic dismantling of Victoria's autonomy. Judge Thompson called for closing arguments as afternoon shadows stretched across the courtroom. Catherine's attorney summarized efficiently. Victoria Hayes needed protection from her own impaired judgment, and guardianship was the compassionate choice to ensure her safety and well-being. Hartley countered with passion but limited evidence. Victoria deserved autonomy, had made genuine progress, and shouldn't be institutionalized against her will. Before I rule, I'd like to hear from Victoria Hayes herself. Judge Thompson looked directly at the defense table. Miss Hayes, this is your life we're discussing. Do you have anything to say? Victoria sat very still for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying across the courtroom. Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to demonstrate something. The courtroom stirred with confusion. Victoria looked at Dr. Chen, who produced a walker from behind the defense table. Nathan's breath caught. He knew that equipment, had seen it in the gym, but Victoria had never successfully used it in his presence. I've been practicing. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the wheelchair arms. Alone, mostly, because I needed to know I could do this without help before I could ask the court to believe I deserve autonomy. Miss Hayes, I don't think physical demonstrations are, Judge Thompson began, but Victoria was already moving. She pushed herself up from the wheelchair, legs shaking but holding weight. Her hands found the walker's grips, white-knuckled but steady. The courtroom went silent as Victoria took one step, then another, her face contorted with effort, sweat already dampening her hairline, but she kept moving. 3 steps, 4, 5. Catherine's face had gone pale. Nathan couldn't breathe watching Victoria walk across a courtroom when 3 weeks ago she could barely stand. 6 steps, 7. Every muscle in her legs trembled visibly, but she didn't stop until she'd crossed 10 feet of open space. Then she turned, showing the court her face, and spoke between gasps for air. I did this. Without Nathan. Taught myself. Proved I could. But the reason I had strength to try, him and Sophie, they gave me, reason to fight. Victoria's legs finally gave out, and she caught herself on the walker, lowering carefully back toward her wheelchair. Dr. Chen rushed to assist, but Victoria waved her off for one more moment. Catherine says I make poor decisions. Maybe I do. But choosing Nathan Cross was the best decision I've made since my accident. He didn't coddle me, didn't let me give up, saw me as a person, not a problem. If that's impaired judgment, then I hope I never recover. She sank into the wheelchair, exhausted and shaking, but her gaze stayed on the judge. I don't need a guardian. I need people who believe I'm worth the effort of healing. Nathan and Sophie gave me that. Don't take it away. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Thompson banged her gavel once, silence falling immediately. Miss Hayes, that was remarkable. How long have you been able to walk? 3 weeks, since Nathan had to leave. Victoria's voice steadied. I pushed myself because I had to prove something. But I only got this far because he taught me I was stronger than I believed. Judge Thompson looked from Victoria to Catherine to the assembled lawyers. I'll be brief. This court sees no evidence of mental incompetence. Victoria Hayes just demonstrated cognitive function, forward planning, and physical determination that exceeds what most people could manage under pressure. The judge's gaze settled on Catherine. Ms. Hayes, your concern for your sister is noted. But concern doesn't justify removing someone's fundamental rights. Victoria has shown she's making informed decisions about her care, decisions that are producing measurable results. Guardianship petition denied. Victoria Hayes retains full autonomy over her medical care, living situation, and personal relationships. The gavel's crack was final. Catherine stood abruptly and left without a word, her attorney gathering papers in stiff silence. Victoria sat very still, as if afraid to believe the ruling was real. Nathan moved before thinking, the restraining order now void, crossing the courtroom to kneel beside her wheelchair. You walked. All this time you were learning to walk. I needed to prove I could do it alone. Victoria's eyes were wet. Before I could ask you to stay. Outside the courthouse, afternoon sun painted everything golden. Tom waited with Sophie, who launched herself at Victoria the moment they emerged. You walked in there. I knew you could do it. Victoria caught the little girl in a careful hug. I couldn't have done it without your dragon drawings giving me courage. Sophie beamed, then turned to Nathan with sudden seriousness. Daddy, can we go home now? To Miss Hayes' house? That depends on Miss Hayes. Nathan looked at Victoria, the question hanging unspoken between them. Actually, there's something I need to do first. Victoria's voice was steadier now, though exhaustion lined her face. Nathan, you're fired. His heart stopped. What? Effective immediately, I'm terminating your employment with the agency. Paperwork will be filed tomorrow. Nathan couldn't form words. After everything, after the courtroom and the walking and the declaration that hiring him was her best decision. Because you can't be my employee anymore. Victoria's expression was vulnerable beneath the determination. The court just ruled our relationship was appropriate, but it won't stay that way if you're working for me. Power imbalance. Exploitation concerns. Catherine will find another angle eventually. So you're firing me to protect us both. I'm firing you so we can be equals. Victoria reached for his hand, so I can say what I should have said weeks ago. I love you. I love Sophie. You make me want to live instead of just exist, and I don't want to lose that because of professional boundaries. Nathan's throat was too tight for speech. He dropped to one knee beside the wheelchair, holding her hand in both of his. I love you too. The words came out rough. Both of us do. But Victoria, I have nothing to offer except everything I need. Victoria's voice was fierce. You offer partnership, belief, family. That's worth more than anything money can buy. Sophie launched into a victory dance. I told Daddy to kiss you weeks ago, Tom laughed from his respectful distance. Kids got good instincts. Nathan leaned in, careful of the wheelchair between them, and kissed Victoria properly for the first time. The courthouse steps were hardly romantic, and curious onlookers definitely watched, but nothing in his life had felt more right than this moment. When they finally broke apart, Marcus Hartley approached with an envelope. Victoria, there's something I need to give you. Your father left instructions when he died. A letter to be delivered when you'd found someone worthy of your heart. I believe that time is now. Victoria took the envelope with shaking hands, Nathan reading over her shoulder as she unfolded pages written in elegant script. Victoria, my brave girl, if Marcus is giving you this, it means you found someone special. Someone who sees past your fierce exterior to the kind heart underneath. Don't be afraid to love them. Don't let fear of loss keep you from joy. The strongest people are those who risk their hearts after being broken. I'm proud of you for trying. Love completely and without reservation. That's the only way to truly live. Your mother would be proud too. We both love you, always, Dad. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. He knew, somehow he knew I'd be scared, because he knew you. Nathan wrapped his arms around her from his kneeling position, and he was right. You're brave enough for this. They stayed like that for a long moment, Sophie joining the hug from the other side, Tom watching with unmistakable affection. Finally, Victoria straightened and wiped her eyes. So, what happens now? Now we figure out what comes next. Nathan stood, stretching cramped legs. Together. I have some ideas about that. Victoria's expression shifted to something almost shy. The settlement from my accident lawsuit. It's been sitting in investments for 2 years. I've been thinking about adaptive recreation programs. using what I learned about recovery to help other people. Like what you used to do, teaching climbing to kids with disabilities, but expanded all kinds of adaptive sports and activities. Victoria's voice gained strength as she spoke. Kayaking, cycling, skiing, everything that helped me feel alive before the accident, modified so anyone can experience it. That's amazing. Nathan's mind was already racing with possibilities. You'd need instructors, medical oversight, liability insurance, and someone with caregiving experience who understands what actually helps versus what just looks good on paper. Victoria met his eyes. I'm offering you a partnership, Nathan. Not employment, genuine equal partnership in building something that matters. Before Nathan could respond, Sophie tugged his sleeve. Does this mean we're really a family now? Victoria reached for Sophie's hand. If you want to be, if that's okay with you and your dad. Sophie looked between them with the seriousness only 7-year-olds could muster. Can I call you Mom? Not instead of my real mom, but also? Victoria's composure shattered completely. I would be honored beyond words. The partnership discussion continued over the following weeks, turning abstract ideas into concrete plans. Victoria's settlement provided substantial capital. Nathan's experience with medical equipment and patient care filled gaps in her knowledge. They visited adaptive sports centers in Colorado and Oregon, studying programs that worked and identifying needs nobody was meeting. Tom Rodriguez signed on as facilities manager, his decades of mechanical expertise perfect for maintaining specialized equipment. Dr. Chen agreed to serve as medical director, ensuring safety protocols met professional standards. The vision expanded from vague concept to detailed business plan, complete with mission statements and projected growth. 6 months after the courthouse, Hayes Cross Adaptive Recreation Center opened in a converted warehouse 20 minutes from the mansion. The space hummed with possibility, climbing walls with adaptive holds, swimming pool heated year-round, equipment for cycling and skiing and activities Victoria was still researching. 30 participants enrolled in the first cohort, ranging from children to adults, all facing disabilities that had limited their recreational options. The opening ceremony drew local news coverage and community leaders, but Victoria's speech stayed focused on personal experience rather than inspiration. 2 years ago, I thought my active life was over. One man refused to let me believe that. Now we're building a place where nobody has to face limitations alone. Nathan added his own remarks, talking about dignity and partnership and the importance of seeing people as capable rather than broken. Sophie helped cut the ribbon, her dragon drawings decorating the facility's entrance hall. That evening, after the crowds dispersed and equipment was secured for the night, Nathan found Victoria on the warehouse roof watching the city lights spread below. She walked there using her cane. The walker retired 6 weeks ago, mobility improving daily, though she still used the wheelchair for longer distances. Big day. Biggest of my life. Victoria leaned against the railing. We actually did it. Built something real. Nathan moved beside her, close enough their shoulders touched. You built it. I just helped with the heavy lifting. Don't diminish what you contributed. Victoria turned to face him. This only exists because you believed in it. In me. I believed in us. Nathan took her hand, feeling the familiar calluses from climbing and therapy equipment. Speaking of which, there's something I've been meaning to ask. He produced a small box from his jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a simple band with an inscription. Victoria squinted at the words in the dim light. You stayed. That's what this comes down to. Nathan's voice was steady despite his racing heart. Everyone else left when things got hard. You stayed, I stayed, Sophie stayed. We built a family from that choice, and I want to make it official. Victoria Hayes, will you marry me? Victoria stared at the ring, then at Nathan, then back at the ring. Her answer came out half laugh, half sob. Yes. Absolutely yes. Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and they stood together on the warehouse roof, lights spreading below like possibilities multiplying endlessly. Sophie emerged from the stairwell where she'd apparently been lurking. Did she say yes? She said yes. Sophie pumped her fist. Finally, I already picked my dress. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the warehouse roof and into the night beyond. Victoria leaned into Nathan's shoulder, solid and warm and present in ways that still surprised him sometimes. You know what the best part is? Not the center or the engagement or any of it specifically. It's that I'm not waiting anymore. Waiting for what? For my real life to start, for things to go back to how they were, for some future version of myself who has it all figured out. Victoria's voice was soft. This is it. Right now, this messy, imperfect, beautiful thing we're building together. The words settled into Nathan's bones, joining all the other truths he'd learned from watching Victoria fight her way back to living. Life didn't wait for perfect circumstances. It happened in the choosing, the showing up, the refusing to quit even when quitting looked rational. A year later, on the center's anniversary, Catherine attended the celebration. She approached Victoria stiffly, the distance between them measured in months of silence. "You've done well here. We've done well." Victoria gestured to include Nathan and Sophie and the entire operation. All of us together. Catherine's expression softened incrementally. "I was wrong about Nathan, about your judgment, about what you needed. I thought I was protecting you. You thought you were controlling me." Victoria's voice was firm but not cruel. "There's a difference, I see that now." Catherine glanced at the ring on Victoria's finger. "He's good for you, they both are." The acknowledgement cost her, which Victoria recognized and appreciated. "Thank you for coming." After Catherine left, Tom Rodriguez appeared with knowing grin. That looked painful for her. Growth usually is. Victoria watched her sister's Mercedes pull away, but necessary. The center's second year brought expansion, satellite programs in 3 cities, partnerships with hospitals and rehabilitation facilities, recognition from national adaptive sports organizations. Victoria traveled for speaking engagements, Nathan managed day-to-day operations, and Sophie started volunteering as a junior instructor's assistant. Their wedding took place on the warehouse roof where Nathan had proposed, surrounded by family and friends and participants whose lives had changed through the program. Sophie served as both flower girl and ring bearer, insisting on wearing dragon wings over her dress. Tom walked Victoria down the aisle, her father's role claimed by the man who'd supported their family through every challenge. The ceremony was simple, vows written by the couple and delivered without professional polish. Nathan promised to stay even when things got hard, to believe in Victoria when she couldn't believe in herself, to build a life worthy of Sophie's trust. Victoria promised to choose courage over fear, partnership over isolation, and to see Nathan's strength even when he felt weak. When the officiant pronounced them married, Sophie cheered loud enough to startle birds from nearby trees. The reception featured adaptive sports demonstrations, stories from participants, and dancing that accommodated every mobility level. Derek Mitchell sent flowers with a note congratulating them both, gracious in defeat. Catherine gave a toast that surprised everyone with its genuine warmth. Late in the evening, Nathan found Victoria in the climbing gym, looking up at the adaptive walls they'd designed together. She'd climbed earlier that day for the first time since her accident, making it 15 feet with specialized equipment and a patient instructor. Thinking about going higher, thinking about how far we've come. Victoria's hand found his. "A year ago, I couldn't stand. Now I'm climbing and married and running a business that helps people. It doesn't feel real sometimes. It's real." Nathan pulled her close, their rings catching light from the gym's overhead bulbs. "We made it real by refusing to give up. You made it real by showing up that first day and not running when I threw pills at you. Best decision I ever made, taking that job. Best decision I ever made was letting you stay." Victoria leaned into him, solid and warm and fully present. "Even though I tried really hard to make you leave, you had to test whether I'd actually stay." I understood that. They stood together in the climbing gym, surrounded by equipment that helped people reach heights they thought were lost forever. Outside, their wedding reception continued, laughter and music drifting through open windows. Sophie's voice rose above the noise, probably dancing with Tom Rodriguez or showing off to other children. "You know what Sophie asked me yesterday?" Victoria's voice was thoughtful. She wanted to know if we could adopt more kids, give her siblings who need families like we needed each other. "What did you tell her?" "That we'd talk about it, together. Because that's how families work. Nobody makes big decisions alone." Nathan kissed her forehead, breathing in the moment and everything it represented. Broken people finding each other and building something stronger than either could manage independently. A 7-year-old girl who'd lost her mother, learning to trust again. A woman who'd lost mobility, discovering she'd never lost her strength. I love you. The words were simple but contained multitudes. Everything you were, everything you are, everything we're becoming together. Victoria turned to face him fully, standing on legs that worked through will and practice and refusing to accept limitations as permanent. I love you too, for staying when leaving would have been easier, for seeing possibility when I could only see loss. They kissed in the climbing gym while their wedding reception continued outside, and Nathan thought about the mansion 3 years ago, where a bitter woman had thrown pills at him to test if he'd quit. She'd been testing wrong. The question wasn't whether he'd quit, but whether he'd see past her anger to the person underneath who desperately needed someone to stay. He'd stayed. She'd stayed. Sophie had stayed. And from that simple choice, everything else had grown. The future spread before them now, full of possibilities they'd build together. More programs, maybe more children, certainly more challenges that would test their partnership. But Nathan had learned something essential over the past 3 years. Love wasn't about perfect circumstances or easy choices. It was about showing up consistently, believing when belief was hard, choosing each other even when fear suggested otherwise. Victoria took his hand and led him back toward the reception, her gait steady even without assistive devices. Behind them, the climbing walls rose toward ceiling heights she'd reach again someday. Not because she needed to prove anything anymore, but because some mountains were worth climbing simply for the joy of movement and possibility. The warehouse doors opened onto celebration. Their family and community gathered to witness this next chapter. Sophie spotted them and waved frantically, dragon's wings flapping with enthusiasm. Tom raised a glass in toast. Dr. Chen smiled from her conversation with other medical professionals. This was it. Not the life Victoria had planned before her accident, not the future Nathan had imagined after Claire's death, but something better precisely because it was built from broken pieces and second chances. Adaptive, resilient, stronger for having survived the fall and learned to stand again. They stepped into the celebration together, ready for whatever came next, knowing that as long as they chose each other daily, they could weather any challenge. The warehouse echoed with laughter and music and the sound of people discovering they were capable of more than they believed possible. And in the entrance hall, Sophie's original dragon drawing still hung in a place of honor, Ember the dragon helping a knight in a wheelchair have adventures. The image that had started everything, reminding them all that everyone needs help sometimes. And asking for it isn't weakness, but wisdom. Home wasn't a place. It was choosing to stay, day after difficult day, building something worth keeping, even when keeping it required everything you had to give. Nathan and Victoria had found that home in each other, and nothing would ever make them let go.